it's just this sobering reality that, what I have here today may or may not be here tomorrow, depending on how Mother Nature, things play out. But the problem is if the actual cost to insure is higher than what the companies are able to charge to cover their risk, they just choose not to insure.
We've heard Danny Wiley talk about, look, we are in the risk analysis business, and you don't have to replace the value to accomplish a diagnosis of a fairly light risk loan on a property and make the loan. You've got a lot of appraisers that are hungry, and need an order, been looking for one for 2 weeks, and one comes over. Do I not make a play at this order for $200? If that's what I got to do to get $200 in the door. Episode 25 of Market Moves with Mark and Jeff. Jeff, great to be with you again today. Look forward to talking about maybe a slightly slower news cycle this week, but covering the latest happenings and goings-ons around real estate.
Yeah, fun doing these, Mark. It's maybe noteworthy that we didn't even have to coordinate on how we were going to start this thing. We're at least getting into a little bit of a groove here with you just kicking us off and working well. And yeah, it's interesting. There are things going on, like you say. I don't know, there may be a lot of brand new headlines, but it's just fun having conversations with you about some of the stuff that's happening out there. And hopefully as we record these, it's of some value to those that are out there listening. But there are a few things I think worth touching on today.
Yeah, it just a note about the podcast generally. We're almost up to 250 subscribers. A huge thanks to all of those. I think the comments and the subscribers are probably the clearest signs that we can take from the marketplace to keep going. Gives us a little bit of encouragement. So thank you for that. Hoping to provide a little bit of use to appraisers who are especially near and dear to our heart, but also to real estate professionals and business connoisseurs generally. So I hope to get there. I was speaking to an appraiser just this week about kind of that operating out of your house and, doing your 2, 3, 4 appraisals a day, whatever it is. And just not talking to people very much and sort of being outside the flow of information. Jeff, we are constantly consuming information in our world, in the professional life, and hope that this kind of water cooler conversation can be helpful to those in our profession that kind of find themselves sort of siloed off from it.
Yeah, absolutely, Mark. I hope that that's the case and some of the value that we're bringing. We've been fortunate to have some good conversations with some stakeholders and market participants. We've had commentary about some of those conversations that we've had with some of the stakeholders, but to me it's been valuable to be able to at least have conversations with them, and I think providing interesting perspectives on what's happening and what some of the motivations are maybe behind some of the actions that take place for me, it's insightful, and I hope it's worth the sharing that we're doing. We definitely appreciate those that support us. I will say though, Mark, I do kind of like that we don't end every episode like begging and pleading for shares and likes and subscribes and all that kind of stuff. I've been kind of proud of the fact that we haven't had to grovel at every episode, for that. So we're grateful for those that are just naturally doing it anyway. But I've worn that maybe as a bit of a badge of honor, probably ignorantly so, but all the same.
Well, Jeff, I may have just thrown that badge away without consulting you. So sorry about that. My shameless promotion here, but yeah, totally agree. This is a bit of a hobby and labor of love here, and excited to see where it goes. So, well, we got a number of topics that we can touch on today. All centered around kind of negative chaos and all those sorts of things, it seems, most often that are out there. But here we are, and we are coming through kind of on, I hope, the tail end. We're recording this on January 14th, and I hope this is the tail end of the Palisade fires in California. And I know there are 4 or 5 other fires. It seems like a few more keep popping up here one way or another. But what a horrible disaster that totally disrupts human lives, families, and all of that, and a tremendous amount of real estate loss. What do you think about all this, Jeff?
It's very sobering seeing some of the images and videos and stuff coming out of that, Mark. And you hope that it can be contained as quickly as possible. Yeah, I've got a little bit of maybe a unique perspective on that. 7 hours, maybe down I-15 down the freeway from Southern California, where these are taking place specifically. But 7 or 8 years ago, there was a fire in the mountains right by where I live, and it really interesting. I remember very vividly. This fire had started by somebody who was burning some weeds, got out of control, but kind of similar situation. The West has been in a massive drought for many, many years now. And so just the risk of fire is, much higher than it has been even out here prior to this big drought that's set on. But so somebody up in the mountains burning weeds around a cabin that they had caught the whole mountainside on fire, literally, and kind of a similar response. I mean, they were bringing people in, it burned for weeks. And I was at this property that was not, the fire hadn't gotten to it yet, but it was on its way. And it was pretty sobering. I was there with the homeowner. Their cabin was halfway built. I was there to do the appraisal on it. And then as I'm sitting there talking with them, they're just dead. Like they're worried as can be. We're building this thing. We've got this construction loan. We don't know if the fire is going to sweep through our subdivision and burn it down or not. And there was literally ash, showering down on us. It wasn't showering, I guess, but it was falling out of the sky while we were sitting there talking. And you just feel so hopeless or helpless in the face of a natural disaster like that. I know you guys have different types of natural disasters than the fires that we see here, but it's just this sobering reality that what I have here today may or may not be here tomorrow, depending on how Mother Nature things play out. And in this case, the fire, the wind shifted, the fire diverted away from that subdivision. A lot of what burnt was just National Forest Service land, and not a lot of human life or not many structures that were taken, but just a vivid experience firsthand of being there in the path potentially of a fire heading towards a subdivision that would have impacted people's homes and lives and stuff. And so for all of those that have actually been impacted and dealing with this massive loss, it's sobering, and it's, I'm sure, got to be a scary experience. And you got a lot of people that are now displaced. And what do you do when your home's literally not there today when it was yesterday?
Yeah, that the natural disaster of my area, Houston, is hurricanes and flooding. And flooding not always coming with hurricanes. And we went through a horrible 3 or 4 year stretch of tax day floods, Memorial Day floods, Hurricane Harvey, which was the end all be all. I've got all sorts of friends that of my age back then, having little kids and waking up to bayou water in their house, knee deep, and having to kind of get therapy and all sorts of things. Those poor kids waking up out of that sort of stuff. And so, it obviously has an enormous impact on the psyche and all of that. So we know all the folks in California are going through those things. And surprisingly, I even remember reading a few articles as I was researching damages and kind of thinking through the concepts of real estate damages. Property value decreases in neighborhoods that have flooded or fired or whatever. And there were several instances of how quick articles, and this was in the Lum Library of the Appraisal Institute. And for anyone that isn't a member of the Appraisal Institute or haven't accessed that, boy, that is a treasure trove of articles and whatnot, dealing with all sorts of real estate topics. But there was one in particular I was reading about Australia in the 70s or something. But how quickly the residents forgot about, or the new buyers forgot about the devastation that had happened in that city or that neighborhood as a result of flooding that had happened there. And you see that a bit here in Houston, for sure, those that didn't experience it don't remember it quite as vividly, just as one. So as time passes, life goes on. But boy, certainly devastating right now. And it seems like on top of losing everything, your memories, your photos, and all of those things, is the horrible real estate losses, backed up by insurance just weeks ago being removed for a lot of these folks here for a variety of reasons.
Yeah, and I've heard some criticisms around, if the insurance companies maybe didn't see this specific event coming, but saw a heightened risk due to circumstances, environmental and climate related. Why didn't others? Why wasn't there better preparation? But and it's such a complex industry, I think, with the way that it operates, Mark. But some of the analysis that I've seen and heard is that there's been a desire to make housing affordable. We've got an affordability, challenge and issue, right? And so the way that the home or the property insurance, the fire insurance works is regulated at the state level, and states dictate in an effort to try to keep insurance costs from getting out of control, dictate how much insurance companies can increase those rates. But the problem is if the actual cost to insure is higher than what the companies are able to charge to cover their risk, they just choose not to insure, which results in what you were talking about, them just simply pulling out. And I've seen anecdotal stories of those that lost the insurance right at the, within weeks or months of when they actually needed it after having paid into it for years. And your heart goes out to those homeowners, at the personal level, but at the business and the financial level, it's like if you've got government regulation that prevents you from operating in a rational way, you're left underinsured anyway, or with too few of options, or you just have your policy, canceled outright. And it's been terrible to see those scenarios.
Boy, I've heard many of these in California here where, they've been paying their insurance premium for 30 years or somewhere around there. And then, just a few weeks ago, removed because of the elements you're talking about. The Department of Insurance for each individual state dictates how much of a premium an insurance company can charge. And then they, from that allowed premium, decide, well, this makes business sense for me or it doesn't, and have recently decided it does not make business sense and it pulled out. So what an awful situation. And who's going to come out on top of that, or who's going to pay for that? I mean, it's seems like it's the taxpayer, it's the homeowner, or it's the federal government. Those are kind of the options on the table there, and somebody's got to do it. So a real mess on our hands.
Yeah, it really is. I hope to see that it gets contained and that the impact is as minimized as possible. It's just hard to see, and in today's environment that we live in, I mean, you see the firsthand footage of exactly what's happening, and all of the destruction that's taking place, and it's different than just reading a headline, and not actually connecting, the human aspect to it. I remember when there was a fire that took out a town on the island of Maui in the last couple of years, and I had some friends that were, kind of indirectly, impacted by that. But just, these things are devastating and change, certain people's lives forever, but they also have ripple and carryover effects in, markets for real estate, insurance, and, and otherwise that are interesting to consider. But it's interesting against the backdrop of human pain and suffering, which is also sobering.
Well, yeah, for sure, Jeff. And it's been many years now since I've read these articles, so I don't have immediate links, and I hope my memory isn't steering us all a little too far from reality. But I think even like FEMA programs are subsidizing the insurance costs for folks that are living in flood-prone areas or disaster-prone areas in such a way that those that aren't living in those are sort of helping to pay the costs and bear the brunt of that really extreme level of insurance required to make this stuff happen. And that doesn't feel right either. So insurance is becoming a real problem here on a number of fronts. And I mean, you're seeing it in auto is the cost to repair cars is increasing so much. But central to a lot of these disasters, and I think there's a lot of different ways we could look at this, Jeff, but just Googling quickly from it's the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations 2023 saying that what is it here, that disaster events have increased from 100 per year globally in the 70s to around 400 events per year worldwide in the past 200 years. And that certainly, that's a 4x more frequent instance of disaster. But in the US, I think that sort of mirrors what we're having. We are certainly seeing from the storm and hurricane perspective, the waters are warmer. And that feeds these hurricanes, and they grow really quickly, and then they just kind of hover over states, and we've just been seeing a lot of increased damage.
Yeah, it drives the frequency and the severity of those, those types of disasters as they come. And I'm not smart enough to know how all of the climatology works hand in hand, but when you have the kind of warmer water temperature driving the frequency and the severity of the storms that you guys get in the Gulf area, and then for whatever the reasons are that you've got kind of a mega drought in the West that's then, more susceptible to, fire danger and risk, and harder to put out the fires that have had, years of dry fuel kind of sitting there and stuff. It makes it harder to deal with the disasters as they do come up. And like you said, Mark, ultimately there's a cost to be borne there. And if you put insurance companies out of business, who's left to pick up the bill? And ultimately it becomes the taxpayers and or the homeowners, whether there's any relief given or not. And it makes it a difficult situation. And I don't know exactly how it will play out, but I expect that there will be some carryover effects into the real estate market where increased insurance costs are going to, in my mind, have to be justified given the catastrophic losses that are taking place currently. And if you add on to what are already historically high real estate values, additional cost to insure the building improvements in that asset, it seems like that's going to put downward pressure on what you can pay for the property if your cost to hold and insure it goes up, 2, 3, 4 times, from what it had been possibly.
Well, Jeff, I think you add on, if you've got a family or life, whatever, no family or family, but life's got to keep going on, and you got to figure out where you're going to live in the middle of all this. But you also have the acknowledgement of the permitting process along the California coast and how long that may take if you ever get approval to rebuild in the same way. It's just a really, really difficult prospect. I think a number of problems to overcome there. So we'll be following along with that. I think it does make for a fascinating real estate kind of case study and puzzle to solve. So we both have a lot of friends that are appraisers in that market that will be working through a lot of these problems. One of them in particular, I know through the Appraisal Institute that does a lot of appraisal of those particular homes that burned down.
Yeah, you bet. And there become, value questions and issues of, the amount of loss, and it drives, some need for valuation services, as those things come through. But man, you'd way rather be just doing an appraisal for somebody who's buying a new home that they're moving their family into than one that is now not there anymore because it was destroyed.
Well, Jeff, from the fiery hell of awful fires in California to a horrible macro environment that we have with interest rates here sitting at 7.26%. My goodness, just seemingly here to get worse and worse. But really stretching just about everybody that is in our space. I saw Ally Financial, their loan division was just recently closed down. This is hurting everybody, and that's just one instance. I did see an update that Redfin had made a few more layoffs. It was only in the 50 or 60 number from the hundreds they've done here recently. But folks are hurting, and notable. I think we may have mentioned on this that the Redfin CEO, I don't even recall his name in the moment, but it was kind of made headlines for saying that if rates stay high, we've got nothing to do but hunker down, drink our own urine and our competitors.
Blood, I think.
What is it? Yeah, my goodness, I don't know. But I sort of chuckled at that commentary. He actually apologized almost immediately. It's like, maybe I shouldn't have said that on a public call, the earnings call, but you do, despite my smile here, I mean, man, it is difficult operating in that. So you can understand how someone in his position would fall into those words.
Yeah, and I can only imagine the challenge of being scrutinized on a public earnings call, but the sentiment is, and I see similar sentiments among those that have been in the just the real estate space, whether it's originating loans, selling the real estate, or doing the appraisals, or otherwise investing, and those that have been through the cycles and these lean years, have kind of come to understand, it's going to happen. And when it does, it really is hunker down and survive by any means necessary. Might have been a more politically correct way for him to have to put it, instead of some of the, the graphic illustrations of what it felt like it took to survive in this type of environment. But I remember back to the conversation that you and I had with Danny Wiley from Freddie Mac, Mark, and he was in the context of appraisal waivers saying, hey, appraisal volume isn't down because of appraisal waivers, or at least not, exclusively or even primarily. But just look at the loan originations. Like, look how many loans we're seeing come through today as opposed to what we were seeing 2 years ago. And I don't remember if it was exactly a half or not today of what it was in the 2022 era, but it was just an acknowledgement that, transactions as a whole are way, way down. It's not a 10 or 15% change from the peak or something. And that has downstream effects to everybody that's involved in a real estate transaction. So it's still the reality that we're living. And, we've commented on it before. Crazy to think that the Fed had cut their target rate by a full percentage point, and mortgage rates went the opposite direction by, almost as much. And it's just having a kind of a lock-in effect and a freezing effect in the market that, we were seeing start to melt a little bit as you got down closer to low six mortgage rate and interest environment.
Yeah. So as we sit here today, if you guys listening to this are like me, it's like the 100th headline to say home sales or mortgage applications are the lowest they've been in 30 years. No kidding. And that is true every week. So people just keep reprinting it. But we have 12% increase in listings. I think that is year over year in the month of December. And we have 3% fewer sales. So we've got inventory building up. We've covered that at length here. We've got roughly 40 more million people in the U.S. Compared to that 38-year ago low. So when you look at mortgage applications per capita, it's especially nasty today. So just the world we're living in, and I think the interesting thing here is that if you take away, at some point, I think we're going to have this thing turn on a dime, and we won't see it coming and won't know what the catalyst is. But I do think that we now have fertile ground for that turning on a dime to take place at some point. And just purely by looking at the Fed's drop of 100 basis points of the Fed funds rate, and mortgage rates doing the exact opposite, right? I think they're propped up for concerns of inflation, for good news is bad news for the mortgage rate, and we keep getting good news on the economy. Although today the PPI, I think it was a little lower than expectation, which is price producers index. So good there. Inflation not increasing as quickly as expected.
Yeah, and I think on the consumer side, the CPI, if I remember right, is coming out tomorrow, and will be interesting to see if it meets. It's so interesting how the market changes and adjusts to what the expectation was. You're above it, by a tenth of a percent, and the market just seems to have a real reaction. And same thing on the other side of that as well. But it's having an interesting impact if we see the inflation get more under control. That's, I think, good news potentially for the economy and for interest rates. But strong output and anything that smells of inflationary potential is I think what makes everybody nervous and really impacts mortgage rates.
It is so interesting too. And I had seen the comment somewhere that you've got all these strong job numbers, healthy investment from the big companies, the tech companies that are making the plays in artificial intelligence and all, and they have a huge cost savings on the horizon here, and just becoming more efficient with less employees and in the use of artificial intelligence, and are really set up, it feels, to magnify some success here in a healthy economy and sort of getting fit in their P&L. I just to share, kind of my inner conscious. We've talked quite a bit about artificial intelligence. We talked about it with Jim Amarin, and I have been pretty dismissive of its impact on appraisers. And I think I'm still there, but I did hear an interview earlier this week from that Elon gave. It was a virtual interview with someone, Harold, I think is the guy's first name. I forget even where it was, but it caught my eye. He has built this enormous Grok AI super center, 3 times larger than anything else in the world. So obviously he's somebody that is attuned to whatever is going on in artificial intelligence, and said that he thought within 4 to 5 years that it would handle every cognitive task that humans had. And I can't imagine that appraisal would be excluded if every other human cognitive task is handled there. So it did catch my eye, Jeff, and or my ear, and I just wanted to mention it. That as we are constantly reacting to the data that's out there. That's not a surprising thought. I think a lot of folks are taking that leap to say, hey, this is going to be nasty. I don't know how. I can't fully see it yet, but the growing strength of this is, just only getting stronger.
And at a very quick rate. Yeah, it was interesting to hear some of the stories of, Elon pulling together this massive cluster of, I think it was 200,000 GPUs, from NVIDIA. How many? 100?
I think 30,000 is the most anybody had put together before, and he put together 100,000.
Yeah, that's right. And then targeting, a doubling of that or something as like the next iteration. So I think you're right that he's very, attuned to that. And it's rapidly changing times, Mark. And I don't know what the future will look like for everybody, impacted there. I saw some comical little advertisement, I think, for something saying, it showed like a real estate agent saying, hey, I don't have to worry about pricing homes anymore. That basically the machine will do it for me. And so like shows you this one little click and here's the number, and she just blindly accepts it, without like any context as to whether it made sense or not. It may as well have been a Zestimate or a whatever else, some number pulled out of a bag. And it's funny to think about in the moment because, the value of real estate is a complex thing to get to, but I do wonder how effectively, the AI will be able to approach those kinds of cognitive decisions to be made. If you can teach a human to learn and do certain things, is the corollary true that you can teach artificial intelligence to do those same things, even when it's kind of a complex analysis? And increasing with the rate at which it's changing, increasingly, it makes you wonder if that doesn't, turn out to be the case. And if that is the case in 5 years from now, Mark, I don't know what anybody's doing in terms of work. It's interesting to hear those in that space. I've heard Sam Altman at OpenAI with ChatGPT talking specifically about the need for a universal basic income. Like, we got to have people with income in some way or another. And regardless of your politics around it, it's just an interesting thought experiment of, if AI can, really does do what Elon is projecting and on the time frame in which he's projecting, it could be way more disruptive to just the economy of things than what most of us are thinking in the moment. I kind of hope the change doesn't happen that quickly, because I think we would have a difficult time adapting that quickly to it. Maybe not, but maybe they'll just be telling us what to do at that point.
Yeah, I do. We may get a little off track here, but I do think that if every cognitive task in some wild scenario or something, maybe less so, but in that direction happens, you are into a world of superabundance, and I think there is a nasty transition period that is relatively short term, but I the other side of the rainbow is okay. I think when you get there, but some sort of nasty transition, no doubt. And I think Jeff, whether I think you and I shared that video with one another. Somebody had a real estate company idea and said, you may not have known this, but AI is now able to value all properties and can assist an instant loan or something like this. So something sort of silly for what you and I know. But I do think it's possible. We've heard Danny Wiley talk about, look, we are in the risk analysis business, and you don't have to replace the value to accomplish a diagnosis of a fairly light risk loan on a property and make the loan. And I don't know what that looks like, but it's another way to skin the cat that the GSE could go after, the insurer could go after. It's just, look, how do we maybe artificial intelligence isn't going to go choose those sales and make the proper location adjustment that needs to happen to with your 3 sales and a cloud of dust sort of thing. But could AI assess risk on that particular loan in a very different way and make the lender very comfortable or prove that loss is really light? Well beyond where I can get to in sort of some solution, but it is another way this cat could be skinned.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right, Mark. And stepping back, I'm not convinced that the world will be, seeing an AI that can do everything. In 5 years from now, I'll concede that Elon's smarter than I am. So I mean, it's probably not something to take off the table in terms of possibilities or whatever. But it's an interesting thought experiment to think through what could the future look like in the coming years. And hard to know how to adapt. I do think you're right. I mean, it certainly, there is the potential to lead to abundance and a lot of, improvements in productivity and, efficiencies. It's an interesting thing to consider, but I think everybody's, that's in the kind of the knowledge worker space, probably well served to at least be attuned to what's happening and what some of the potential or possible outcomes could be.
Well, Jeff, terrible macroeconomic markers lead us into superabundance and AI taking over the world. But zeroing back in, the effects that all of this has had on the stock price, market movers, which I guess we will call all of you that are listening to this. Scott DiBiasio's guest appearance with us in October mentioned the likelihood of conservatorship ending, or at least the pursuit of it ending, if Trump were to win the election. He did. At the time Scott was talking about that, Fannie was trading at about $1.05 a share, where it's been hovering for quite a while. Today, it closed at $7.05, I think. We talked about this on our last podcast, saying, hey, you might have a spread trade to make here. Not financial advice. Please don't do it. But those struggling with appraisal revenue could be making some money by paying attention to what's going on out there in a space they know.
Well, I was just going to observe, Mark, that if anybody did follow the financial advice, which we're not necessarily recommending that you do, it's worth at least what you're paying for it in getting it on this podcast, which is probably not a whole heck of a lot. But interesting to see that the market's reacting, for Fannie stock price and Freddie Mac stock price as well has trended very similarly as we looked at, where that's been over the last, extended amount of time. And this kind of came on the heels of investor Bill Ackman talking a little bit about, hey, this could actually happen, and here's a pathway for it to happen. And the market's responding. Now, the counterpoint to that, I think, was we had Ed Pinto on, who was saying, yeah, I think that there's going to be a desire and an effort to make it happen, but whether they can actually recapitalize those institutions in a way that you can turn them out into the wild, remains to be seen. I think he expressed at that time some skepticism around it. There have been counterpoints, saying, hey, they could accumulate the capital needed to get there, and it actually wouldn't be that hard. It's been fun to kind of watch. Since we recorded last week, I think their stock price had moved from in the mid $4 a share up to the close that you just referenced at just over $7 a share. So on a 1 week time frame, your financial advice wasn't too bad. Not that I followed it, but had I would have been better off.
Well, I think, it's going up right now, and I'm sure at some point, it dropped pretty healthily on a Thursday or Friday of last week. And so it's really volatile right now. And it's, mostly in a positive direction, I think, because you just keep getting new leaked kind of news info heading, I think it was Fannie or was it FHFA that put a new CFO, maybe it was Fannie, new CFO. And I think he just was quoted as saying, look, I'm here to do whatever Trump would like me to do, sort of thing. And so you just have the drumbeat is continuing. And I think the Bill Ackman sort of support, although he's owned the thing for 10 years. So he's been waiting for this moment for 10 years and certainly capitalizing on it as he does. But, I think providing a fairly reasonable pathway to getting this done, which is essentially saying, look, this thing can IPO or re-IPO or reissue into privatization at enormous market caps, given how much bigger it is now. And that kind of solves all the capital requirements that Ed Pinto raised. And, I don't know, but there is a pathway, and I think there is a real pathway to volatility. So we don't know your situation, and damn sure not a financial consultant. So no advice here.
Yeah, if you want to see our balance sheets, you'll know that you don't want to follow our financial advice. But I will take your increasing stock price, Mark, and see it raise it with some decreasing stock prices that were just. It was an interesting corollary that I noted. A mutual friend had sent us a link to a short video clip. I think it was CNBC. I don't even remember exactly where they were hosting it. If we can find it, we'll post it, a link to it. But it was just an interesting thing that didn't surprise me, but I hadn't really thought about before. But they had posted a chart of the stock price of two of the largest mortgage lenders in the country, Rocket Mortgage and UWM, which had each of them had stock prices peak around September of last year of 2024, at least peak over a relatively short period of time, at a time when mortgage rates were, starting to come down, and there was maybe some optimism that they were going to continue that trajectory with anticipated, Fed fund rate cuts. Still penciled in and coming, and that sort of a thing. Since that time, what's happened is the mortgage rate, and I don't know if you had pulled up, Mark, or know what it was at the time. It was mid sixes, I think. Sure. We're up over 7, as you talked about now. So since September to January of 2025, mortgage rates have gone up, call it 0.75 of a point or something. Their stock price has gone down. UWM was at $9.50 in September, $9.50. Was down to $5.82 today. Rocket was at $20.50 roughly, and they were down to $11.15. So not a halving, but a significant drop in that price. And the point that this analyst was making in this short video clip was simply that when there's an expectation that mortgage rates get good again or start to improve and may trend that way, these are probably good stock bets to expect to go up given where they were recently, and a pretty direct correlation in the movement of their stock price for UWM and Rocket and what the mortgage interest rate has done over that time. Inversely related, obviously. But it was just an interesting analysis that, like I say, Mark, didn't surprise me and made a lot of sense, but I hadn't really thought about it in that context of the two largest mortgage lenders' value fluctuating with what the mortgage interest rate is doing.
Yeah, I've over the last 6 or 7 months, I don't understand it well. It's a little beyond my my area of expertise. But I think there is a necessary strategy of those guys to handle mortgage servicing rights and the selling or keeping of those one way or another. And so there's sort of there can be a difficulty to navigate there that they are trying to navigate. And so I think there's maybe additional risk as rates stay higher for longer here. I don't know, but that could be somewhat adding to. So unsurprising, but I think valuable to take a quick peek at what the users of appraiser services and those in the real estate space are experiencing. It's everybody's hurting everywhere, certainly, and I think those stock prices reflect that. I saw a press release, I think it was today, of Voxter, who is an AMC and in kind of large real estate company holdings group that had just announced sort of seeking kind of what to do next strategy options that I didn't take as overly positive that are out there. So you add that to Ally Financial and them closing down their lending operation. It's just more struggle all the way through, and the rates higher longer is really just stretching those in the space.
Yeah, it is. You see those signs popping up, and it doesn't surprise anybody that high mortgage interest rate environment results in difficulty in getting transactions done all the way around. But the thing that's been just interesting to look at is maybe some ability to quantify how much of an impact that has had from shutting down of the mortgage division on the Ally mortgage side, to just impacts on stock price. And I think you make a good point, Mark. I don't know that it's directly causal and exactly related, but it is definitely correlated in what some of the mortgage company stock prices have done relative to how, where the mortgage rate sits and overall mortgage volumes
Amen. Yeah. Very good. Well, I wanted to call attention to, our space getting a little buzz in a kind of a major publication, Business Insider. The title of the article was "Home Buying's Giant Hidden Cost." There's just been a lot of good public awareness, I think, over the last year plus of realities in our space, good or bad. I certainly wanted to compliment the Appraisal Regulation Compliance Council that I think is a newly formed group. Jeff, you and I know of a few of those folks there that are doing a number of things, but one of them is gathering many anecdotes and specifics of appraisal fees and appraisal management company fees being sort of grossly disproportionate to what one would expect. And this article in Business Insider is sort of picking up on that that compilation or report, and talking about what I think it was $12 billion of in AMC's fees since 2009, and not always well disclosed.
Yeah, it's an interesting topic, and frankly, in our space, a pretty hot topic, and somewhat divisive, depending on whether you happen to be an appraiser or an AMC. But the idea that you hit on, Mark, of just the disclosure or the transparency, in what's happening is interesting and hits home a little bit for me. In our state, and in fact, in most states, there's a regulatory agency or body over appraisers that also oversees appraisal management companies. One of the rules that our state happens to have is a disclosure of a separation of the appraisal fee and the appraisal management fee when there is an appraisal management company. Not every appraisal is ordered through an AMC, but when there's a disclosure requirement that the appraiser report the appraisal fee and the AMC fee directly in the appraisal report. Idea being what you just mentioned, essentially transparency to the consumer so that the consumer understands what they're being paid for, or what they're paying and what they're getting in return, in order to create a firewall, in order to offload some variable expenses. There are reasons that some lenders choose to order appraisals through a third-party management company as opposed to doing it in-house. We'll forego the long history lesson on how it evolved and why it came to be. But I think at the end of the day, when there's transparency around what you're paying for and what you're getting as a result is in the consumer's best interest. And I don't think it happens all the time, but I hear stories of, an appraiser being accosted by a homeowner saying, "Why are you charging me $1,200 or whatever, to do this appraisal?" And the appraiser saying, "Well, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm getting paid a fraction of that, and whatever it is, $300, $400, $500 or whatever." And then the homeowner's left confused of, why am I being charged some amount that's 2 or 3 times what the appraiser's saying they're getting charged. Now again, I don't think that happens in every case, but I've certainly seen scenarios where that has happened anecdotally, and it just leaves the consumer with a bad experience and frustrated, and frankly, the appraiser too, saying, "And why am I getting paid a fraction of what the borrower or the consumer is paying for this appraisal service?"
Yeah, you bet. I mean, transparency seems like an easy win and fairly obvious. I certainly would be for that. And I think all of this ends up certainly the anecdotes that are in the extreme that this ARCC has compiled and really referenced in this article are signs of the cycle most often. And, sadly, this thing goes both ways. In COVID, we were seeing appraisers making buku bucks on assignment that they were making 1/10 of buku bucks. And, so those clients, as I remember, sort of have it's a long memory, but I don't really think it's anything about exercising revenge or anything like that. I mean, it's just the forces of the market kind of taking hold. You've got a lot of appraisers that are hungry, and need an order, been looking for one for 2 weeks, and one comes over. Do I not make a play at this order for $200? If that's what I got to do to get $200 in the door. those are the things that appraisers face. And so it ends up being a pretty combative relationship between the appraiser and the AMC, and whoever has the power in that moment is exercising it. And it isn't all AMCs, of course, but I think those natural forces lead it that way. And in some cases, I'm sure the AMC is saying, man, I ain't making much money right now either. And so this is an opportunity to make some money too.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And we've gone through a very exaggerated swing, like you said, Mark. In COVID times, the bottleneck, the pain point was getting an appraiser to take the job. And now, you look up a few years later, and there's not enough work to go around. And even, I'm seeing situations where AMCs are pit against each other, bidding to try to get a job placed as quickly and inexpensively as possible. And that's not to say that happens with every job either necessarily, but there are these market forces that when there's a big swing in demand, whether it goes up a ton for appraisal jobs to get placed and fulfilled, or it drops off precipitously, it results in these consequences where you go from being desperate to place an order to desperate to get an appraisal order as the appraiser, and it's the dynamics are not real pretty sometimes, and I think we're seeing that play out.
Well, I think for those lenders that do use appraisal management companies, and it doesn't have to be combative between the appraisal management company and the appraiser, and in fact, it shouldn't be. And I think my view is that appraisers and AMCs can work together to go serve the public better. Appraisers are here. We talked a little bit about this earlier in this podcast, that we are living in a bit of concern that our services won't be needed in a decade or a half decade or something like that for mortgage transactions. And the best way to make a play on that and to try and preserve the use of our service and the value we provide in the space is trying to offer whatever the public is looking for. And I think appraisers and AMCs can work together well to make that happen. Yeah.
And I don't know if that's a perspective that everyone shares, Mark, but to me, it really comes down to, appraisers got to take good care of their clients, whoever their client is. And if the client is willing to take care of the appraiser to the extent that they can, regardless of the market, dynamics at the time, it just results in a healthier and a better, relationship, and the ability, like you say, really to then downstream serve the client and the public or the end user of the valuation services, better than when there's this, this tension that's going on. And some of it may be hard to fully eliminate, but it comes down to providing a meaningful and a valuable service in a way that that the market recognizes and values. And my hope is that will be the case, long into the future. But it's a bumpy ride. There are ups and downs, to be sure.
You bet. Well, really fascinating business article, amazing Business Insider article, amazing to see it sort of making it into public conversation. I don't know if this would have gotten maybe 1/100th of the viewership that their normal articles get. I got to be interested to see that. But word is getting out there. I think there's a lot more of valuation and mortgage related items that the public should be educated on. And boy, I think around the bias and discrimination, there's just tons of things as an appraiser that I would like the public to be more knowledgeable on as to what goes on in our processes, what's possible in our processes and all. And so it's great to see some of this making its way into to more public forums.
Yep. Yeah, it really is. And I hope that that's part of what we can be providing, is at least some perspective with some thoughtful analysis behind why things are the way they are, and what might be able to be done differently or better. But at the end of the day, I think, like you said, Mark, the transparency makes a big difference. It's kind of a no-brainer win, and kind of wraps up, I think, the topic there. But enjoy getting together and parsing these things out with you.
Amen. Yeah. Great times, Jeff. Look forward to the next episode and batting around some more real estate ideas.
Absolutely. Till next time. Appreciate it, everybody.